What up? You're watching a program. Wow. What up? You're watching a pro game programmer vlog. I work at Defiance Game Studio. My name is Josh Paulison, and I'd love to tell you a little bit about what I do and what it looks like in the everyday. So most recently, I've been working on some serialization. You might have no idea what serialization is, and that's okay. It's not a term that you hear from day to day. Basically, I'm working on saving and loading the game. So there's a lot that actually goes into that, a lot more than you might expect. So when you want to save data, what does that look like? Let's say that you want to save a character, and that character has position, that character has, well, in the case of Archmage Rises, we can be looking at emotional state, we can be looking at memories, we can be looking at relationships. How do we save all of that data? And at first, it might be like, okay, well, I guess you can save a bunch of numbers somewhere in a sheet. Okay, well, how do you pull those back out from that sheet? Let's say that this isn't how we do it, but let's imagine that you're saving it to an Excel spreadsheet. You want to make sure that you're using the right cells and that you're saving to the same cells that you then want to load from when you want to load the game again. Okay, well, there's some stuff to that, so you can imagine it that way. Now let's take it a step further. What happens if you want to have characters reference other characters? So you have a relationship, you have a character that has a relationship with another character. Now you need to store not just a character, but you need to store a reference to another character. Well, one of the things that you could do is you could have it so that that character stores all of the data for another character in their relationship information, so that you see under one character, oh, okay, here's this other character's name, here's their own relationships and all that. And so you kind of get this nested system where you have spreadsheets and spreadsheets. But wait, that's not going to work because you have all of these characters connecting with different characters. And what you're going to find is if you do that, suddenly you're going to get a lot of duplicated data, because suddenly every character is storing every other character's data. And actually what you'll find is that characters, there's this kind of circular thing where characters are referencing other characters that are at some point referencing this guy again. And now you have this circular loop. So what can you do with stuff like that? Or maybe you have multiple characters that are referencing the same item. And so if you just went out and you saved that item's information, the item's name, the item's value, whatever information that you need to save out, you don't necessarily need to save out all of it, but whatever information you need to save out, you run into this issue when you load in all of that data, and that you might get two copies of the same item rather than the characters actually referencing the same item. Like maybe you have a quest where you need to end up finding a lost book or something like that. And if we do it wrong, what can happen is that that character has a reference to one book, and then we created a new book rather than actually the book that they're looking for. And so suddenly they have a book they're looking for as an item, and there's the book that is actually out in the world. I don't know if this is interesting to you. I find this a really geeky, exciting problem. So what you need to do in those cases is that you need to figure out, how do I save out this data and how do I load in this data? And it might sound like that's all there is to it, but it's not, because you need to make sure that it is extensible and usable by other people on the team. One of the big things that is really important when you are programming, when you are creating features, is it's not just that you want it to be great for the player, you also want it to be great for the rest of your team. It might be amazing for the player and nobody else on the team knows how to use the thing, and that's a disaster. And it could also be something that the rest of the team knows how to use and is a disaster for the player. You run across both of it in programming and game programming. And so you have to have a few things in mind. You have to have what is best for the player, what is best for other programmers, what is the clearest, what is the easiest implementation or the most reasonable implementation based on our targets, and what are our goals for the game? Because the way that you store data, if you are making an online game where you need to push things to the server, is very different from how you would want to store it locally, because you're not going to be doing the same comparisons if you're doing it locally versus on a server. On a server, you probably are storing it very differently, and you might need to compare more data to each other. You might need to have everything comparable. Whereas if it's a local game, then you might even have different file system types. And so maybe you have to save the data in different formats in order to pull it in correctly. And I guess I'll throw in another thing that's kind of a fun hitch, is that how do you save different types of items? So there are different ways that you can handle this. In our case, we're using C#. We are using Unity, which you write C#, which is a programming language, in order to use Unity. And you can have different object types inheriting from other object types. How do I explain this in a way that is, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, And I know that I'm trying to figure out a good way to explain it without using the right terminology so that if you don't know the terminology, you can understand it. I guess I'll just say, how do you know the type of an item? And sometimes we'll have different item types because there's a lot of data that when we create an item, we already know, hey, this item has all this data. We're just going to store that type of item so that we don't have to save all of this data. Anyway, I guess that another way to put it is that we have our data that we want to save, which is unique. It is unique to the gameplay session. It is unique to that player's file. What is the data that we don't want to save? And also, what is the data that we want driven by design? So maybe we push an update to the game. Maybe we push an update where suddenly, oh man, this spell was OP. We're gonna make it a little bit less OP, or actually a better example, because we probably wouldn't want to edit that. Maybe we have enemies that maybe there's a typo in descriptions. So we want to make sure that that data isn't necessarily hard-coded into the code, but we want it to be in an external file that designers can go in and edit, and then we want that to be pushed to players. So actually, yeah, item descriptions is a really good example. So we've got these three different types of data. We've got this data that we want to be saved to individual files. We've got this data that we just don't want to be saved. And we've also got this data that we want game designers to be able to edit, and we're all doing a bit of game design. So we want it to be something that all of us can edit, including people who are not programmers. And so it's a fun problem. I think it's a really fun problem. And there are a lot of tools that try to help you with this. One of the things that's always tricky is that the tool will never do exactly what you want it to. Whenever you are using something, I should clarify what I mean when I'm saying tools. So there are a lot of, what's the best way to put it? There are a lot of code packages, a lot of code that other people have written to solve these problems. And so it might sound like, okay, you just pull in their code and it works. No, because their code was made for general use cases. We are trying to solve a specific use case. And when we try to solve a specific use case using their general code, it doesn't always go well, because just because they covered 80% of use cases or even 99% of use cases doesn't mean that our 1% lines up. And that's one of the big things that we've run into recently. Me and my coworker, Michael, we were talking a bit about serialization and, okay, how is this working? He was focusing on that, and then I jumped on board, and I guess it was kind of funny. I don't even remember how the original conversations went, but he was like, yeah, we might have to do something custom. And I was like, sounds like you don't have to. I don't think we should do that. And then within a week, I was like, hey, I think we need to do something custom. And I just started working on stuff and prototyping. I was like, okay, yeah, this works. Like, we talked about it, and we're moving forward on that well. But it was kind of funny because I don't even remember how all the conversations go, but there was some flip-flopping and trying to figure it out. Because one of the things is that with a custom system, it's going to take more time. I'm not going to say always, because sometimes the custom solution, it has an initial upfront cost, but it saves you tons in the end. Like using the pre-existing tool, I don't know if this is like really geeky, specific stuff that you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't care. Let me know in the comments if you're like, this is too specific. One of the things when using other people's packages is that it's not going to give you all the features that you want. One of the big issues that we ran into was the question of, okay, so we want to make sure that we have items referencing each other so that without copying all of the data. So we have two characters pointing to the same item, or a character and a quest pointing to the same item. We want to make sure that it is the same item. Now, we can do that if everything is saved in one giant file. That sucks for a few reasons. One thing, if we have everything in one giant file, we can't asynchronously, I'm going to try to use non-programmer terms. We cannot load multiple files in at the same time. Let's say that we have 1,000 characters. I'm not quite sure how deeply we will process each of those characters, because we're going to have different amounts of data depending on how close you are to the characters, and we'll kind of bring them in and out. But yeah, we would very easily want to have thousands of characters, items, all of that. We want to have thousands. I'm afraid of saying too big of numbers, but no, we're going to have a crap ton of data. So tens of thousands, millions, I don't know what's a reasonable number to say, but we're trying to have just what the player needs so that it doesn't like go nuts, but it's going to go nuts. So we have to be ready for it to go nuts. Anyway, it would be great to be able to load in 5 character files at a time rather than 1. And if everything is one giant file, then we can't do that. And so it slows down the process a lot. And then we're trying to process one giant file and make sure everything's good, rather than trying to process 5 different files at once. Because if we have 5 different files at once, we can load those in at once. Now, that might sound like a straightforward, oh, so if you have 5 different files, you can load in multiple at once, that saves time. Not necessarily, because if you load in 5 small files, it might be that it would have been faster if they were all in one file. So, okay, maybe we need to figure out a way to group these if we want to, but not necessarily group them. But then we still need to make sure that there's a way to differentiate which file is which. Oh, and something else that was a problem with the pre-existing package. So it would save everything as one file for references to work. Okay, so if we want it to be multiple files, we need to create our own serialization system. Here is another thing that was really frustrating with both multiple systems that we've tried, is having good error messages. So telling us what went wrong is huge for debugging. We need to know what went wrong. If we don't know what went wrong, then we don't know what went wrong, which means it's way harder to fix it. There are stories of spending a day or so going with this very fuzzy error of, oh, something broke. And we have to figure out where in the code it broke and why. If we write our own custom solution right now, we can see, oh, so on the item, the description broke because it was trying to save when it shouldn't have been. Or, oh, we accidentally lost a reference to this item and we couldn't find it. We can get good, specific information to really help us debug and move the process forward more efficiently. So, I guess I threw a lot out there, and maybe that feels like a lot to take in, but I guess that the big things for you, if you're like, well, okay, what are some things to kind of learn from this? One of the big things is that I love serialization. That's the number one thing. No, it's not. When you are working on a game project as a programmer, you're not just coding for the players, you're also coding for the team. And you're also not just coding for programmers necessarily. You can be coding setups for game designers, for level designers, for other people. And so you want it to be usable. You want the code to be something that other people can read and be like, I know what's going on here. And you also want it to be something where maybe somebody else on the team, it's like, okay, they're not a programmer and they need to know how to use this, or they need to be able to. Time to export it to a spreadsheet. Excel, if you want to learn good tools for the games industry, but you don't want to be a programmer, Excel might be really worth learning. Whether you're interested in narrative or if you're interested in game design, Excel is a really important tool actually. It's always going to depend on the company. That's not a guarantee, but learn Excel if that really is a big deal to you. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so you're building your tools, you're coding for everyone. And that's really important to know because you're gonna upset a lot of people if you don't code for them. Another thing that's really important is that when you are coming across a problem, it's always tempting to use the pre-existing solution. Everybody thinks, oh, Unity has built-in physics. Unity will solve my physics problems. Good luck. Unity's physics has its own share of problems. There are a lot of things to learn about it, but whenever you use a pre-existing system, you get all the hiccups and the hitches that come along with it. It can solve a lot of problems and it can help things go faster, but the thing that's very difficult is that you always have a specific use case and nobody else coded for your exact specific use case. Now, there might be exceptions when you really drill down into the specifics, but in general, nobody has coded for your specific use case. So it can be much faster to roll your own solution. Some of that is learning because you might be like, well, I don't know how to do that. That's okay. Then don't roll your own. Start with what somebody else did. But at some point, you're going to have to learn how to do that yourself. Not because I don't know what I was gonna say there. Just because you need to solve your specific problem, and that can be scary at first. Like I remember looking at certain things and being like, how the crap do I do this? But it's a growing process. You don't have to know how to solve it today or this year. Like it's okay. It's a learning process. It's a development process. No pun intended. That's a pretty good pun though. I should have taken credit. So yeah, I think that covers things. I haven't touched my tea. I hope that that's helpful. If that information to you is interesting and you get anything out of it, please like, comment, subscribe. Now I'm like, should I ask to subscribe? Because in the last 2 videos, I was like, if you want to subscribe. I I don't know what to add to that. I'm suddenly pumped talking about this, and I didn't think that I would be. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I talk about what I do, and then I share what are hopefully helpful lessons or insights for you, learning more about the industry or about how game programming works, or at some point I could talk about design or some other aspects. I definitely want to acknowledge where I am more knowledgeable and less. I'm not an expert on every role in the industry for sure, or on every position or on every company, but feel free to drop your comments below or your questions. And if it's a question that I can't answer based on my own experience, I'll just let you know. And no hard feelings, I hope. If there were, then that'd be sad, and we could cry about it together. Well, have a fantastic rest of your day, and take care. You might be thinking that a snowman mug is out of season. Apparently, you have never been up north.